to take a look at the activities and, of course, the instance of anti-corruption unit, the impact of why taking a look at the activity MDAs. We'll take it up from the federal and, of course, bring it down to Edo State. Because if we don't fight corruption, corruption eventually fights us. If we don't kill corruption, corruption will eventually kill us. So we have no choice other than to fight, and keep fighting until eventually we win by reducing corruption to the barest minimum. Our focus right now is on the MDAs. With me here in the studio to really talk about this, he is the Deputy Executive Director of ANES. Join me to welcome Comrade Leo Atapo. It's a pleasure to have you on this platform this evening. Welcome.
Thank you, Wilson, and good evening, our viewers.
All right, let's say, talk about corruption. We are not like alien to corruption. You might have heard about corruption permeating government organization from the top to bottom. Talking about top, from federal government, local government, even state government. And now we have the MDAs. Yes, they were meant to do something. They were carved out for the benefit of Nigerians. They were carved out for the benefit of Edo State Senator. They were carved out also for the benefit of the microcosm, which is the local government areas, the smaller unit. But it seems as if, so to speak, they are lagging in what they ought to do to make the life of, Nigerians better vis-a-vis the citizens of Edo State. Now, what do you think about all this? Comrade Leo.
Yeah, ANES, recently we commissioned an assessment of the anti-corruption units amongst the federal ministries, departments, and agencies, the MDAs. The ACTUs, they are an offshoot of the ICPC Act 2000. So the ACTUs are like the babies of ICPC, and they are established, in the various MDAs by their ICPC, working in collabo with the MDAs. And essentially, they are set up, to improve integrity and monitoring, of the MDAs to ensure compliance with the ICPC Act, to reduce corruption within the system, to prevent corruption, essentially. So, from when they were established in 2003, they had just 5, because there was a pilot scheme. Just 5 MDAs were tested, to see how it works. And eventually from 5 in 2003, by 2015, that had grown to around 200 MDAs, having the actors. So they grew phenomenally. As at 2024, we had up to 400, units in the various MDAs. And that's at the time we are now validating the research report we conducted on Thursday here in Benin. We had over 500 units now established in the various federal MDAs. No state in the country at the moment, has an ACTUS unit. So part of what we are recommending right now is that it's important that the states themselves, begin to set up ACTUS units within the MDAs, within the Edo, for instance, the Edo State now. There's the need for the Edo State government under Senator Mondo Pevolo to set up the ACTUS unit within the MDAs. Because now he was one of those we invited, during the activities we had before the elections, to see what they can do about corruption, preventing corruption, and then blocking the leakages within the system. That's been a major problem, for this country. not only in Edo States, across the board. And we feel that, one way to addressing the problem of corruption is to ensure that, those at the helm of affairs, the president, governors, they commit, exercise some kind of political will, to deal with the problem. Because if we don't deal with the problem, as you pointed earlier in the introductory notes, the problem will kill us. And major problem for the development of this country today, is traceable to corruption, that has, permeated all the facets of this, of our society. Yeah. And so there's a need, the ICPC establishment, is looking at how best can it even be prevented, before you now start even chasing those who steal money. How can you even prevent, corruption from happening within the MDAs, So the research came up with a whole lot of findings, and one of it is a recommendation, that there is the need to establish, actors.
No, hold on. Now, you're talking about the establishment of actors. What's preventing it from being established in the first instance? Because, like what you opined, it is very, very important to have it.
Yeah, so why it has not been established, very often state governments used to look at federal laws as it belongs to the federal government. It is not for us. So, wow. But if you look at a law like the FOI, the Freedom of Information Act, for a long time, when you do an FOI Act, to require information or data from state governments, they usually turn it down. They will say that the law is not applicable to them. But the recent Supreme Court judgment, has clarified that the FOI Act, is binding on all tiers of government in the country. So as a journalist, for instance, you can use the FOI to source for information, to seek information, from the state government, or from the federal or the local government. And they are obligated, by the FOI Act to provide that information to you. So in testing that kind of law, one will expect, for instance, that the Office of the Attorney General, in testing the outcome of that judgment, the Office of the Attorney General of the Federation, can do a memo to all Attorney Generals, 36 states.
There's Commission of Justice and the rest of them.
For them to set up, a desk on FOI desk in their ministries, such that once there is, a request, an FOI request, that kind of a desk can even place, or people can route, the FOI request through that desk across board, across the states, the 36 states of the Federation. And I believe strongly that a progressive government, should jump into these kind of instruments, legal instruments that are available, for citizens to join government, to deal with corruption. Because we are aware that government alone cannot fight corruption. That is why for us in an age, and the civil society, at large, we believe strongly that we also have a responsibility, to point to government available instruments, available opportunities that can be utilized to deal with this hydra-headed problem, of corruption.
All right. Talk about hydra-headed problem of corruption. You get to realize that some of the opinion that the MDAs, there are too many, so to speak. So the answer that some government of the day, even when President Muhammadu Buhari was in power, yes, he empowered some MDAs, but I realized that some are almost replicating functions. Now, when Tinubu came into the scene, they were talking about at least bringing the number down to prevent this duplication of function. Do you think that would be another problem if we want to set the actors you talked about?
Well, I think the setting up of factors is not about the numbers of the MDAs, but maybe we look at it, from that angle. There was this Oronsai, panel report,
yes,
that looked at the number, and the functions of the various MDAs across the country, and made its recommendations, and we expected long ago that panel report should or ought to have been implemented, because they took time to look at, all of the MDAs, those that were duplicating functions,
Yeah.
and made their recommendations as to which should be fused, which of them should be merged, which should be standalone, and all of that. And they came up with something really nice that we expected that, even the past government would have considered. But again, there's a whole lot of problem, and then some political interests are arising from all of those. Those at the helm of affairs in those ministries will want to protest. There are some agencies you want to fuse. Some of them will say, if you fuse us, we'll do this and that and that. So, but again, it requires a president with a political will, to implement that kind of report and that kind of decision. But I think I also see that even the Bola Ahmed Tinubu administration is already doing that. We see that some ministries at the onset of his administration, he decided,
To merge
some, and then get some agencies. But even at that, the number is still huge. But still, back to the actors, the anti-corruption units. Whether you have just 100 MDAs in the country, whether you have just 50, what we expect is that each of them should have the anti-corruption units, because establishing those units will also help to deal with issues of procurement, for instance, because such a committee, such a unit has representation from various departments within the ministry or within the agency. For instance, you could have those from procurement. You can have those from communication, those from admin and whatever. They all come together to form that committee, and there is a chair. So at the meeting we had on Thursday, we had some representatives, for instance, from NITDA, from Federal Ministry of Agriculture, and we had even from the psychiatric hospital here in Benin. They were all part of that review of the assessment that we carried out in Anij. And the assessment report showed that most of the actors, are having some issues, some challenges, that's not enabling them to perform optimally.
Now, what are these challenges?
So some of those challenges identified were lack of resources. Some of them, you don't even have office space. They don't even have within the MDAs. They don't have office. They don't have equipment. Some of them don't have the funding for them to perform. Just a few MDAs were able to report to us, that they now have some amount of money, budgeted for them to be able to carry out their report. The other challenge that we also identified was the fact that as actors, they whatever findings they make within the department, the ministry, department, agency, they still have to report to ICPC. And now you are the chair, you are a staff under a minister, under the head of an agency, and then you have your report. And then you have a boss who will also do evaluation appraisal for you.
Like the bottlenecks.
And then you are now, if you are sending your report to ICPC, that will indict your boss, So that in itself was seen as a big gap, in the instrument. So one of the things that the assessment recommended was that there's the need to review the ICPC Act 2000 to give a biting teeth to the actors. So to give them some kind of prosecutorial powers, that it's not just enough for you to have some findings from within your MDAs, but you should also be able to take that forward. You should be able to also press some charges against, those, to giving them those kind of enabling powers, to further. And we have some good practices from Kenya. Kenya have a similar, institution that enabled the establishment of actors. So the chair of actors, that unit, has the power to press charges, against anyone within the ministry or department or agency that is found culpable as a result of activities of that unit.
Right.
So that in itself will instill fear within the operators within that MDA to prevent them, from involving themselves in corrupt practices.
All right. Now,
that's a major recommendation, that we're also making as a result of the challenges that were noticed from the assessment.
If you take a look at the political setup, you get to hear about party affiliations, political godfatherism, that might just also be a factor. So what is our Nigeria doing to make sure that this doesn't count as one of the factors preventing the establishment of these units in some, if not all, MDAs?
Well, I think political godfatherism is a big problem within the Nigerian political setting. But the establishment, one major recommendation from the assessment done by ANIJ as well, is the insulation of the anti-corruption units, the actors, from political interference. And in fact, even the insulation of the ICPC, the institution itself, the main agency, from political interference. And how can that happen? If the president is the one that will appoint the chair of ICPC, for instance, or the chair of another EFCC, for instance, and very often, there's that tendency of loyalty of the appointee, to be loyal to the one who appointed him, who is in office. So the recommendation is that appointment of the CEOs of such agencies should be carried out by some kind of maybe bodies that are independent.
But these bodies, can they be independent? Because knowing fully well that we're in the political dispensation, everyone will want to fix someone there that will dance to their own tune.
Yeah, like we can have the body of benchers, that the judiciary can even that can flow from the judiciary, to make those kind of recommendations of those to be appointed, and that applies even to the electoral body, the Independent Electoral Commission. To insulate them from political interference, because he who pays the piper dictates the tune. Those who appoint people in Nigeria, very often they seem to have that kind of loyalty. We now have this element of people tending to be loyal to those who bring them to power. They feel they owe all their lives, to
their allegiance and all.
Their allegiance, whatever. And so there is the need to separate, the body that makes appointment of people into such positions.
Now, hold on.
From political interference.
Now, someone's saying that. Let's just digress just a little bit. The Independent National Electoral Commission, take a look at the name. They are independent. Some of the opinion that is not even independent. Some are saying ICPC also, from what they are saying, they are not independent. If we go to the sister agency, the EFCC, some are saying these are just government bulldog to attack perceived opponent. Do you think that's what is playing out right now? It's more of these MDAs vis-a-vis preventing them from having this unit you are talking about.
Oh, yes. I think that is the point where you are coming now to understand the point I am making. And that's why we are also recommending that, those occupiers of those positions should emerge from some kind of independent processes, that will throw them up. You could have such body recommending like 3 persons, up to Mr. President, assuming you want the president to have input into the selection. You can have 3 persons thrown up, for appointment, or it's advertised in a way that the body that is saddled with the responsibility to select, can make that kind of selection of people of credible, impeccable character, to occupy such positions. And it's until we begin to take such decisions, it will really be difficult to deal with the problem of corruption, holistically. Because again, the person who occupies the driver's seat, in those institutions matters a lot, because one's loyalty is to the government in power, it becomes a problem. Just the government in power and not to the citizenry, If you compare institutions in the US, for instance, they are strong institutions because they are not, exposed, or they are not just allegiant, to the whims and caprices of Mr. President. You know, Donald Trump, for instance, has taken all kind of decisions, through his presidential orders, executive orders.
But they're not opposed by courts.
But,
yeah,
they go, citizens can go to court.
Yeah.
Even lawmakers can go to say, no, we Mr. President, you are wrong in this direction. And they stand him down. These chances are bound. Like the issues of immigrants, His intention was to throw out all illegal people he considered illegal immigrants from the U.S. But certain other persons said, no, you can do this.
Yeah, but still, you just get to realize that the U.S. is not Nigeria.
Yes, we agree. But we should work towards, those strong institutions. Our institutions need to be strong for us to develop. We cannot develop with weak institutions, with fragile institutions, with institutions that are how do you put it again? That are
weaker than these said personalities of
their allegiance is to an individual,
or political party,
or to a political party, or to or to the president, or to the governor. Yeah. No, your allegiance should be to the state. It's not to any human being. It's not to any individual. You take decisions in the overall interests of the state, not the overall interest of an individual or a section of persons within, the society.
So, all right. Well, some are saying if you take a look at Nigeria today, get to realize that the fight against corruption has been ongoing for quite a long time. And of course, our nation also have been contributing their own quota in the fight against corruption. From your own assessment, are we winning this battle?
Well, you look at it from two sides or two ways. On the one hand, you want to look at it with certain indicators.
Yes.
If you look at Transparency International annual, perception index reports, the one of last year, Nigeria was ranked 145. Of 180 countries. Still trailing dangerously behind. And then in terms of performance, Nigeria scored 25%. Out of 100, when you score 25%, that is total failure. So from that angle, when you look at such assessments, you can say, yes, we're not doing well. But again, if you look at it from another angle, before now, you do not have institutions like EFCC, you do not have institutions like ICPC. Imagine in a country like Nigeria today that you don't have such institutions. It would have been worse than Bangladesh.
True. You're right about that. You're right about that. Yeah. All right. Well, before comments are decent on today's edition, but what advice do you have for these MDAs, the directors, you just name it, in terms of having this anti-corruption unit?
Well, I think the advice is to the federal government, because it's a creation of the federal government. The advice for them, one, is to strengthen the actors. And what do I mean by strengthening the actors? They should provide the needed resources for the units, the various units in the MDAs, to function optimally. They should provide the equipment, the needed equipment. And this is an era of technology. They need to provide the needed technology. This is the time to leverage technology, to track, to gather data, to gather information. If you want to know how things are moving within the office, you really do not need all the time to physically go and meet people or be photocopying papers. You know what I mean? If you have access, you have with technology, you can easily track, how funds are moving within the system. And we're also recommending a dashboard, for instance. If all the actors across the MDAs in the country have a dashboard where all the activities, are in real time being, be posted on the dashboard, people can easily track what is happening in each of the MDAs. And then we also recommend that the federal government should continue some kind of monitoring and evaluation of the actors. So you even see the institution you have established or the units you have established, how they perform, how they faring, what are their weaknesses, what are their challenges, what do you need to do next, what's, other thing, areas that you use. Because the whole idea is to prevent corruption within the MDAs, to ensure that, resources that are budgeted annually, are utilized for the purpose for which they are meant.
All right, thank you so much, Comrade Leo Atabu. We can go on and on talking about the fight against corruption, but reminded that the fight against corruption is still very much on and alleged, is contributing its own, contribution in the fight against corruption. By doing this research, trying to make recommendation, and I just hope and pray that the government of the day should just follow the recommendation as proposed by our age. Is very, very important. Have this unit in MDAs. Once more, Comrade Leo, appreciate your comment. All right. We'll do it again. Remember, to our email address for feedback on this program, all you need to just go to your email and send the message to anagenigeria@gmail.com for WhatsApp number 081-8767-4339. But I'm still on Facebook.com/AnAgeNigeria. On our Twitter handle is at AnAgeNigeria. On our YouTube at AnAgeNigeria9347. All those are for feedback. Write to us today, and definitely we'll respond to your questions, to your yearnings, and how to make those states in particular and Nigeria in general better. Once more, Leo, appreciate you.
Thank you.
We'll do it again next week, Monday, God willing. Bye for now.